What's up, y'all? Welcome. Welcome to this impromptu dialogue, this impromptu live on the reliability of the New Testament. Can we, in fact, trust what we have in front of us? And we're going to look at that. We're going to be looking at primary source material. And we're also going to be looking at a text called Evidence That Demands a Verdict by the great biblical historian and scholar Josh McDowell. So, yeah, we're going to get it in today. I welcome anyone who can come in and who wants to come in and chop it up about the Bible. Is it God's word? Is it man-made? Is it, and this discussion was based around, let me put this on the screen. Um, this live is based on a conversation that I had about the idea since the Bible was written by man, it cannot be trusted. So the question on the table is this actually fact? Is this true? So I welcome you to come on in and share your thoughts, your opinions on this topic. Can we in fact trust what we have in our possession when it comes to the New Testament, right? And this is a conversation that hip hop has been having. They have been having this conversation because many of the practitioners of the culture of hip hop do not believe that the Bible is God's word. They don't believe it has been preserved. They believe it was corrupted and it was changed, and they have many reasons for this belief. But we want to dive in tonight. We want to just dive in and look at the evidence. We're going to hear some videos from Josh McDowell as well, so we can have a better understanding of what it is that we are talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring on the screen this right here. And we're going to look at the reliability of the Bible, again, from Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. So we're going to look at part one, the confirmation or confirmation by historical text. And it begins by stating that the reliability and the trustworthiness of Scripture. And we're talking about that. So, what we are establishing here is the historical reliability of the scripture, not its inspiration. I like how he put that. It's not not its inspiration, but can the Bible be historically proven? You got many people who say, many of the stories in the Bible are plagiarized. These are plagiarized stories. For instance, the flood of Noah, Jesus, and his story. So we're gonna kind of just dive in and look and see, can we trust this? Because if we can trust it, then that deals with a lot of issues. But if we can't trust it, then we need to understand how we got it. How do we even um, how do we even get this thing? So these are some things that we want to try and just deal with. So yeah, let me see something. Something's happening here with my Wi-Fi. Okay. Let me just make sure. Can everybody hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. And again, I welcome an open dialogue about this. Right? It's a healthy debate. There are those who say, "Nah, you can't trust this." So let's go. And I'm going to be reading this. I'm putting this on the screen so you as well can read it along with me. The historical reliability of the scripture should be tested by the same criteria that all historical documents are tested. Somebody by the name of C. Saunders, in his introduction to research in English literary history, he lists and he explains the three basic principles of historiography That's a mouthful. Historiography. They are the bibliographical test, the internal evidence test, and the external evidence test. We're going to kind of go through these today, right? We're going to go through these today. We're going to look at this and see what it actually is. So we're going to start with the bibliographical test for the reliability of the New Testament. Now, when we say bibliographical, right, it's a big word. We're not talking about Bibliographical. We're talking about a term that is used in academia, the bibliographical test for the reliability of the New Testament. So the bibliographical test for the reliability of the New Testament, um, and the test is an examination of the textual transmission by which documents reach us. Okay, so not just biblical documents, all ancient documents, right? In other words, and I'm reading, since we do not have the original documents, let me stop right there. And we do not. We don't have the original documents. The original documents are called the autographs. We don't possess the original autographs. Okay. But what we do have is the manuscripts, the handwritten copies of the original autographs. Now, you would say, well, how can we be sure that these handwritten copies came to us in the exact way that they were originally penned? I get it. I get it, and I understand that concern, right? So let's keep reading. How reliable are the copies we have in regard to the number of manuscripts, MSS, and the time interval between the original and the extant copy? So how reliable? We're gonna look at this, okay? Because somebody would say, well, you got points in time where you are copying and then copying and recopying, and something's going to get lost in translation. Let's see if that's actually the case. Let's see if that's actually the case. And again, I welcome anybody who wants to come on and join in, and I will drop the link if you want to get in here and have a discussion about this, whether you agree or you disagree. I would prefer those who don't agree, who think the Bible has not been transferred or brought to us in its original form. I would love to have that conversation with you. Okay, so let's go. We're going to start with the manuscript evidence of the New Testament. There are those who say we don't have any evidence. There's no evidence to back this up whatsoever. None. All these stories are plagiarized. All these stories are not true. But let's look at it. There are now more than 5,300 known Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. Add over 10,000 Latin Vulgate and at least 9,300 other early versions, manuscripts. And we have more than, excuse me, and we have more than 24,000 manuscript copies of portions of the New Testament in existence today. Now you might say, so what? So we got 24,000. Well, this is where these tests come in, where we look at other works of antiquity and their surviving manuscripts. That's what we're going to be doing today. Josh McDowell says no other document of antiquity even begins to approach such numbers and attestation. In comparison, the Iliad by Homer is second, with only 643 manuscripts that still survive. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to look, I'm not going to look at all this right now. We're going to get into this. Here we go. somebody by the name of John Warwick Montgomery, he says that to be skeptical of the resultant text of the New Testament books is to allow all of classical antiquity to slip into obscurity. For no documents of the ancient period are as well attested bibliographically as the New Testament. Man, I want to read that again. That's powerful. But is it true? That's what we want to know. Is it true? But I want to read it again because I think that it is seriously powerful. Bang Swift, what's up, man? Gigi Don, Gigi Don says, some parts have been changed in the New Testament. All right. Gigi Don, let me put this on the screen. So Gigi Don says, some parts have been changed in the New Testament. Okay. So Gigi Don, can you give me some examples of what has been changed in the New Testament? Can you show me the original, and then can you show me what has been changed? So I'm going to wait for you to do that. But let's get back to our reading for a minute. I'm going to come back and open dialogue with Gigi Don. This is beautiful. I love doing this. Let's get it. Let me read John Warwick Montgomery's statement again. He says that to be skeptical of the resultant text of the New Testament books is to allow all of classical antiquity to slip into obscurity. For no documents, I want you to get that, no documents of the ancient period are as well attested bibliographically as the New Testament. All right? Sir Frederick G. Kenyon, who was the director and the principal librarian of the British Museum and second to none in authority for issuing statements about manuscripts, he says these words: besides number, the manuscripts of the New Testament differ from those of the classical authors, and this time the difference is clear gain. In no other case is the interval of time between the composition of the book and the date of the earliest extant manuscripts so short as in that of the New Testament. He goes on, the books of the New Testament were written in the latter part of the first century. The earliest extant manuscripts, trifling scraps accepted, are of the 4th century, say from 250 to 300 years later. Now, but what does that mean? So you say, well, it says it's the 4th century. No. What you have to understand is when it says the 4th century, it means that century was when the manuscripts were discovered, not when they were written. Okay, I want you to understand that. They were written in the 1st century, but they were discovered through archaeological digs in areas of the 3rd and 4th century. Okay, so let's look at this. Now, this may sound a considerable interval, but it is nothing to that which parts most of the great classical authors from their earliest manuscripts. We believe that we have in all essentials an accurate text of the 7 extant plays of Sophocles. Yet, the earliest substantial manuscript upon which it is based was written more than 1400 years after the poet's death. It's a long time. Kenyon continues. Follow me now. In the Bible and archaeology, the interval then between the dates of the original composition and the earliest extant evidence becomes so small as to be in fact negligible, and the last foundation for any doubt of the scriptures have come down to us substantially as they were written has now been removed. Both authenticity and the general integrity of the books of the New Testament may be regarded as finally established. Let's see what another biblical scholar says about this. I'm just reading what they're saying at this point, y'all. So we're just reading what these scholars are saying. Can we trust the New Testament? So if you're joining us, if you're just coming on in, we're dealing with, is the Bible false? Right? So many within the hip hop community don't believe the Bible to be accurate. And again, if you're just joining us, repetition is good. They believe that many of the stories were plagiarized stories, such as the flood, such as the story of Jesus. These were plagiarisms that men took and wrote and compiled the Bible. Today we're talking about the New Testament. Let's see what F.J.A. Hort rightfully adds, that in the variety and fullness of the evidence on which it rests, the text of the New Testament stands absolutely and unapproachably alone among ancient prose writings. Keep going. Let's keep going. J. Harold Greenlee states, the number of available manuscripts of the New Testament is overwhelmingly greater than those of any other ancient work or other work of ancient literature. In the third place, the earliest extant manuscript of the New Testament were written much closer to the date of the original writing than is the case in almost any other piece of ancient literature. So let's look at the New Testament compared with other works of antiquity. But let me go to the chat and see if anybody's making any kind of comments. Ill One is in the building. Ill One is in the building. So yeah, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this and see, because a lot of people make these claims. Nah, you can't trust it. That thing has been corrupted. You don't know where it came from. The reality is many people don't know how we got our Bible. They don't know. They don't understand manuscripts. They don't understand the autographs. They don't understand the different textual families. They don't understand how we even got this. So let's dive into the New Testament compared with other works of antiquity. Now, keep this in mind. When it comes to other works of antiquity, nobody questions whether those works came from the original source. Nobody questions this. We take it at face value. The New Testament is the only written document in all of history that people question. Number two, it is the most attacked written document in all of history. But I digress. Let's keep going. Here we go. The manuscript comparison, F.F. Bruce in the New Testament. Let's dig. F.F. Bruce is a biblical scholar of the highest order. The New Testament document vividly pictures the comparison between the New Testament and ancient historical writings. Perhaps we can appreciate how wealthy the New Testament is in manuscript attestation if we compare the textual material for other ancient historical works. So let's check it. For Caesar's Gallic Wars, composed about 58 to 50 BC, there are several extant manuscripts, but only 9 or 10 are good. And the oldest is some 900 years later than Caesar's day. Wow. We keep going. Of the 142 books of the Roman history of Livy, 59 BC to AD 17, only 35 survive. These are known to us from not more than 20 manuscripts of any consequence, only one of which, and that containing fragments of books, is as old as the 4th century. So of the 14 books of the histories of Tacitus, AD 100, only 4.5 survive. Of the 16 books of his annals, 10 survive in full and 2 in part. Of the text of these extant portions of his 2 great historical works depends entirely on the 2 manuscripts, one of the 9th century and one of the 11th century. What does all this mean, right? What does all this jargon mean? What it means is the ancient manuscripts of classical works have less, oh my goodness, so much less bibliographical attestation. In other words, the manuscripts are so much less. But yet we trust these works. We trust them. We don't doubt these works. Right? Let's keep going. Let me keep going. I'm gonna go down here. Here we go. Excuse me. Greenlee writes in Introduction to the New Testament Textual Criticism about the time gap between the original manuscript, which is the autograph, like I said, and the extant manuscript, the old copy surviving, saying that the oldest known manuscript of most of the Greek classical authors are dated 1,000 years or more after the author's death. The time interval for the Latin authors is somewhat less, varying down to a minimum of 3 centuries in the case of Virgil. In the case of the New Testament, however, 2 of the most important manuscripts were written within 300 years after the New Testament was completed, and some virtually complete New Testament books, as well as extensive fragmentary manuscripts of many parts of the New Testament, date back to 1 century from the original writings. So what does this mean? We're going to get to that. Greenlee, he adds that since scholars accept as generally trustworthy the writings of the ancient classics, even though the earliest manuscripts were written so long after the original writings, and the number of extant manuscripts is in many instances so small, it is clear that the reliability of the text of the New Testament is likewise assured. Let's listen to what Bruce Metzger, who is a biblical scholar, says regarding this issue. Now, let me go to the chat. Let me just shout out some people. Just want to thank everybody for being in here. Il1, thank you, man. Il1 is in the building. And I challenge anyone who wants to come on, who has an opposing view, that you might feel like, now the New Testament can't be trusted. But this is what we're looking at tonight, to find out, can it in fact be trusted? All right, can it in fact be trusted? All right, so let's go. Let's go. Let me post something here. Let's go. Here we go. So back to Bruce Metzger. In the text of the New Testament, cogently he writes of the comparison, the works of several ancient authors. So far we've seen primary sources or secondary sources who are quoting primary sources and saying the same thing. Metzger is going to be no different. The works of several ancient authors are preserved. Tousby, the thinnest possible thread of transmission. For example, the compendious history of Rome by I'm having a hard time pronouncing these names. Velleius Paterculus survived to modern times in only one incomplete manuscript, from which the Editio Princeps was made. And this lone manuscript was lost in the 17th century after being copied by Beatus Reunis at Amberbach. Even the annals of the famous historian Tacitus is extant so far as the first 6 books are concerned, in but a single manuscript dating from the 9th century. In 1870, the only known manuscript of the Epistle of Diognetus, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Diognetus, an early Christian composition, which editors usually include in the corpus, of apostolic fathers, perished in a fire at the Municipal Library in Strasbourg. In contrast with these figures, the textual critic of the New Testament is embarrassed by the wealth of his material. Let's listen to what F.F. Bruce says, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to compare these writings. F.F. Bruce says that there is no body of ancient literature in the world, I want you to hear that, which enjoys such a wealth of good textual attestation as the New Testament. So let's look at the ancient writings, the author, when they were written, the earliest copy, the time span, and how many copies. Let's look. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do this. I'm going to try and make this a little bit bigger. Let me see if I could do that. Yeah, I'm gonna go here. I think I'm gonna be able to bring it up one time for your mind. Let's do that. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, it should be good right there. All right, so let's look at it. So we see the first author, follow me, is Caesar. Well, when was it written? 100 to 44 BC. The earliest copy is 900 AD. What is the time span between when it was written and the earliest copy is 1,000 years. How many of these copies survived? 10. Okay, let's look at Livy or Livy. 59 BC to AD 17. Now, it doesn't tell us the earliest copy. It doesn't tell us the time span, but it does tell us the number of surviving manuscripts is 20. We got Plato, 427 to 347 BC. The earliest copy was 900 AD. The time span from the time it was written to the earliest copy is 1200 years. How many copies do we have? 7. Let's look at Tacitus, which we talked about, the Annals. When was it written? 100 AD. The earliest copy, 1100 AD. The time span, 1,000 years. How many copies? 20. Also, minor works, 100 AD, 1000 AD, 900 years. How many copies? 1. We have Pliny the Younger in his history. It was written in 61 to 113 AD. The earliest copy that they found was 850 AD. The time span, 750 years. How many of these copies? 7. I think you get the point, right? If we keep going, we see. Now, Sophocles down here, Sophocles right here, y'all. He has 193 copies. Okay. And we keep going and we can see, right? We can see all of this is there. All of this was there. Let me let y'all stay in the chat. Let me take care of something real quick. I want you to just examine this chart. Give me 1 minute. Okay, I'm back. All right, so we can see the authors, when it was written, the earliest copy, the time span, and the number of copies. Okay, let's keep going. The textual comparison by Bruce Metzger observes, of all the literary compositions by the Greek people, the Homeric poems are the best suited for comparison with the Bible. Okay, he adds, in the entire range of ancient Greek and Latin literature, the Iliad ranks next to the New Testament in possessing the greatest amount of manuscript testimony. Let's keep going. Metzger continues, in antiquity, men memorized Homer as later they were to memorize the scriptures. Each was held in the highest esteem and quoted in defense of arguments pertaining to heaven, earth, and Hades. Homer and the Bible served as primers from which different generations of schoolboys were taught to read. Around both, there grew up a mass of scholia and commentaries. They were provided with glossaries. Both fell into the hands of allegorists. Both were imitated and supplemented, one with Homeric hymns and writings such as, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, and the other with apocryphal books. Homer was made available in prose. Okay, so let me bring this back down. Let me bring this back down a little bit. Just a boom, boom, boom. Okay, right there. I want to do that right there. So let's go down. Let's go down. Now let's look at, you can see it right here. When you compare the work of Homer's Iliad, when was it written? 900 BC. The earliest copy that we have is 400 BC. The time span is 500 years. The number of copies, 643. Now let's look at the work of the New Testament. The New Testament, when was it written? Between 40 and 100 AD of the first century. The earliest copy we have is 125 AD. The time span, 25 years. The number of copies, over 24,000. Wow. 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 That's crazy. I want to get to something over here. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Forgive me. Hold on one second. Let me just get this down. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, right here. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to play. I'm going to get this off the screen. Now what we saw was that in comparing ancient documents, there is none. I want you to hear me, y'all. There is none that even comes close to touching the New Testament. None. Not one. And we use the same test to determine ancient documents. So the bibliographical test, not the Bible graphical test, the bibliographical test is the test that they use to determine if an ancient document can be trusted. So we have to use that same test when it comes to the New Testament. And we see beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is nothing that even comes close to what we have in our possession. Okay, now I'm going to bring up Josh McDowell. I'm going to let him kind of speak here. Okay, and I'm going to share this screen. Okay, we have the screen. I'm going to go like this. And let me see if y'all can see it. Yes, I'm going to get out of the screen. I think, let me do that. I'm going to get out of the screen. And what is this? Okay, here we go. Now you tell me if you could see this. Here we go.
When you examine any document of history, not just the Bible, you apply the bibliographical test. And that test asks questions of the manuscript, which is a handwritten document. Now, why do they have to ask questions of the manuscripts? For this reason: literature of antiquity was written on material that would perish. And most of it was written on, do you know what ancient paper was called? You're right, papyrus. It was written on papyrus. Papyrus came from the papyri reed grown in the shallow waters of the delta of the Nile. They would clip the reeds just below the water, slice them, and they would lay them out to dry. Then they would crisscross the reeds, and in between the reeds, they would place a cement or a glue substance, and they would let it dry. And you know, when they let it dry, it became quite a durable piece of paper. In fact, sometimes you could lift it up and almost see through it. But no matter how well it was constructed, it would eventually deteriorate. It would rot away. And it was according to how long it lasted, according to how much it was involved or exposed to the elements, to heat, to coldness, to the sunlight, would determine how long the papyrus would survive. Then you had the problem with the ink. They didn't have Parker Brothers back then. They had good ink, but not ink like we have today. But even today, with almost any type of ink, say you write a note to your kids and you leave it on a picnic table outdoors, and it's exposed to the sun. Even with the ink today, what happens to that ink? You're right, it starts to fade. Well, ink in the old days, it was used in the manuscripts, would start to fade because a lot of times they had to read according to candlelight, so they read outdoors and it was exposed to the sunlight. So they had to ask certain questions of the manuscripts to see if what you have is what was written down. In other words, here was a problem. You have the original. It's called the autographa, and it will start to rot away. So they do generation number one. Maybe they make 25 copies of it. And then generation number one will start to fade or to deteriorate. They'll make generation number two. Maybe they make 50 copies. And then they make generation number three ad infinitum. And there's two questions they ask about these manuscripts. The first question I'm going to deal with is what's called the timeline. You say, what do you mean the timeline? From the original, how far is the copies that you have removed? See, the rule of thumb is the further they're removed from the original, usually the greater the inaccuracy. Why is that true? Now, you know why. Think, why is that true? Right. Because usually it means it's been copied more. So there was a greater chance of human error in copying the manuscripts.
Okay, so let's look at we're gonna look at another video. Hold on, let me just pull that up. Okay. As soon as I get through this little commercial, so sorry. Okay, so let's look at this. Okay, so I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna bring this up on the screen. I'm gonna share my screen. So we got this. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen, and then we're gonna go. Here we go.
The bibliographical test of any document, we're applying it to the New Testament. And the question is, how many manuscripts do you have? The more manuscripts you have, the easier it is to reconstruct the original. For example, if you have 20 manuscripts, and in those manuscripts, you have the Gospel of John. But in John 3:16, there's three different renderings in those manuscripts. Some translate, "For God so loved the world." Some say God thought a lot about the world. And some say God thought the world was cool. How do you know what's in the original? You can't. It's impossible. However, if you have 400 or 500 manuscripts, then it is so much easier to use those manuscripts to recreate the original to a high percentage of a pure text. Again, let me compare the number of manuscripts with other literature of antiquity. For example, Caesar and the Gallic Wars, there's only 10 manuscripts that survive. Of Plato, there's only 7 manuscripts. Many people consider the Roman historian Tacitus the number one Roman historian, and yet there's only 20 manuscripts that remain of his annals. Of Pliny the Younger, 7 manuscripts survive. Of Thucydides, 8 manuscripts. Suetonius, 8 manuscripts. Of the Greek historian Herodotus, there's only 8 manuscripts that survive. Everything else is lost. Sophocles, there's 193. Of Lucretius, there is 2. Of Euripides, 9 manuscripts. Of Demosthenes, there's about 200 manuscripts. Now, Aristophanes, there's only 10, maybe 12 at the most. And Aristotle, only 49 manuscripts. Do you know what there is of the New Testament? Just of the New Testament, I've been able to document 24,633 manuscripts of just the New Testament. I never knew that until I set out to write evidence and demands a verdict against it and found out that I was wrong. I was dumb. The only problem is others were dumber. They made a movie out of that, Dumb and Dumber. But in that whole process, I concluded there's absolutely no comparison in numbers between the New Testament and any other book in all of history.
Okay, so listen, there you have it. There you have it, right? We're gonna look up. I'm gonna see. I want to find another one of his works, which is some great stuff that Josh McDowell did. Let me go back here. Let me go back here. Boom. Okay. Is it accurate? Thousands of manuscripts. Okay. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay. So anyway, we actually don't need to look anymore. So I just really wanted to come on and help give a better understanding of how we got our Bible. How many manuscripts? I mean, listen, comparing apples to oranges here, there is no comparison. There is no comparison. The New Testament. Now, while we look at that, you would say, but that doesn't prove the New Testament is true. Maybe you're right. Maybe it doesn't. But it does prove that since we have so many more manuscripts, that the chances of mess ups, the chances of corruption are nil to none. Now, what we do have is we do have errors in the Bible. Oh, wait a minute. There's errors in the Bible? Let me explain what I mean. There are grammatical errors in the Bible. Okay? So somewhere along the line, they changed a letter. They might have, again, you're copying this painstakingly. This is a hard job to do. Okay? You're copying it on the papyrus and, but when you look at the amount of these quote unquote mistakes, they don't add to a hill of beans because it doesn't change the story at all. If you put it together, you can put it together and you can see, okay, THE, the word the. Oh, the H is not there. Well, based around the context of the sentence, okay, that should have been the word the. This is what happens. So when we talk about, these quote unquote errors, no, there's really nothing. It doesn't change the story of Jesus. It doesn't change the story of the apostles. It doesn't change the stories of Paul's letters. And it changes nothing. Doctrinally, it is sound and secure. So we can be We can be satisfied by knowing that what we in fact have is what in fact they had. And we can lean on that based around the number. And look, this book was written a long time ago. They have found numerous more things about this when it comes to this. So for those that continue to say, well, no, you can't trust the Bible, because I don't know that people have really understood these comparisons with ancient documents and comparing them to the New Testament. All right. I just wanted to share this with you tonight. God bless you, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. And we're going to be coming back with some more stuff, later on. And I'm working on a new live that I want to do. But listen, is the Bible false? The answer is absolutely, absolutely not. And so I see Ill One. I'm going to put this on the screen. Ill One says, okay, but is you talking the Bibles as literalism or as figuratively? Okay, well, I'm talking about literally. Okay, the Bible can and should be taken literally. You know, when there's something in the Bible that is a figure of speech, you understand this by the different genres in the Bible. The Bible has history, the Bible has poems, the Bible has prophecy. Okay, so um, you know, did Jesus speak in the temple? Yeah, that's not figuratively, that's literally. Yes, he spoke in the temple. Okay, when Jesus says, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Well, obviously, he's not promoting, cutting off your hand. He's talking about the seriousness of the situation, okay, with sin. So there's definitely ways to understand what's to be taken literally and what's to be taken figuratively. Okay, so that's what we need to know. But I'm out, man. God bless you guys. I hope you enjoyed tonight. Please like, share, subscribe, and join channel membership for exclusive content. Grace and peace.